Sometimes it feels so good to just put paint on the paper, and the way that the paint just bleeds together, it just looks and feels so right. It makes me see why people like making that abstract stuff. Sounding like an old man. That abstract stuff. But there is something about the raw materials of the paint, the raw materials of art, just doing its own thing that's very alluring, and it just feels nice. But I always end up turning that raw material into something figurative. I don't want to say realistic, because none of my stuff's super realistic. At least I hope not. One time in art school, there was an assignment to draw something in our room. And actually, this was just an online class. But anyways, the assignment was to draw something in our room. And I remember I drew this really creepy bunny from imagination. And the teacher's note was, "I said to draw something in your room. I hope this isn't in your room." And I remember all the comments on it were like, ha ha ha. But I remember I had a really hard time just drawing from observation. It was hard, but that wasn't my problem. My problem with it was that it was boring to me. And harder. It seemed easier to draw out of imagination, I guess, because from imagination you're making it all up, so there's less wrong answers. You can do whatever you want. I guess that's that abstract stuff. You know, when there's no rules, you can't really tell if it's good or bad. But I'm kind of somewhere in between those two modes of making art. Figurative enough to where there are kind of right and wrong answers, and like when stuff looks wrong, even though, you know, I'm painting like spooky goofball stuff, it's like it doesn't really exist in real life, but it's close enough to real life to notice when something just looks like it shouldn't be that way. When it could be, like, it's obvious that it could be a little bit better if it looked more like this, or if you did the shadows more like this. But then I think that can go too far too, where all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, why not just paint, you know, a portrait from reference and try and make it look exactly like that? And to me, that's just the other end of boredom. That's just not my instinct, I guess. My instinct, and I think that this is the best kind of instinct to have, but where it's not super clearly defined. Not the art, but the instinct, like what you're looking for, when it's not quite something that you can articulate. And this is just me talking and thinking, but it's when you can't really define it with words, because if you can define it with words, then you can just say it. For me, it's like a searching thing. It's like, I don't really know exactly what it is, but it's something sort of like this, and then it feels like it's getting closer and closer, and then sometimes it just feels right, and that's when you know what you've been looking for. I've never gotten there purely by just following a reference, by doing a still life drawing, even of something that I've sculpted myself. And I've never gotten there with pure imagination either, although the pure imagination is usually closer. And then it's like, there's some smaller things where, oh yeah, this should look more realistic. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but that's kind of what's going on. Anyways, have fun. Good night.
world's worst mom. Most mothers would probably be mortified by that nickname, but Skenazy embraced the title. She had given her son the kind of independence that she and most of today's parents had enjoyed back in the 1970s, when the crime rate was much higher. So why had her choice generated so much outrage and condemnation? Skenazy realized that something was seriously wrong with modern parenting. In response, she created a blog to explain her philosophy and to call attention to the paranoia and overprotection that had become normal features of American parenting. She called it Free Range Kids. Since then, Free Range Kids has grown into a full-fledged movement, including a book of the same name, the reality TV show World's Worst Mom, and a nonprofit called Let Grow, which you can find at letgrow.org. The fire extinguisher was such an apt gift coming from Skenazy, who included a note that read, "See, I care about safety," because the gift represents her message in a nutshell. We should all take reasonable